My dad wants me to forgive the man who assaulted me and let him go near me, and my child unsupervised. I was assaulted by my husband's best friend Jack when I was 16, but that wasn't even the worst part. You see, my father never liked my husband, but he absolutely loved Jack. He came from a great family with a great reputation. So when Jack had his way with me, my dad never believed me when I told him. To pour salt in the wound, Jack's mom was also my dad's boss. And I knew that played a big part in my dad not believing me, but I refused to stay silent. I went to the authorities despite my dad begging me not to. While I was waiting for trial, I moved in with my boyfriend, now husband, and his parents because my dad got so hostile with me at home. That's when things turned bad, though. While at my boyfriend's, I found out I was pregnant. I knew it wasn't my boyfriend's either because we were never intimate and I was never with anyone like that beforehand. Fast forward 5 months to the end of trial. Jack admitted to the charges and ended up taking a plea deal and got no jail time. The only caveat was he never had the right to see my daughter. She was born 9 months later, and the day that happened, my father asked me to move back home and said sorry for everything he did. I knew it was fishy, but he was my dad, so I decided to forgive him. Big mistake, but not at first. The first year was peaceful. My dad apologized to me, was the perfect grandfather, cooked us dinner, the works. But then 1 year later, everything changed. But not because my father changed. You see, I went to college a few hours away, and my dad had retired early to watch my daughter while I went to college. During the week, I stayed on campus and went home on the weekends. Well, one day we had a big snowstorm, huge, and my Thursday and Friday classes were canceled. So I went home early without telling my dad to surprise him. And guess who was in the kitchen when I walked in? Jack's mom, my dad, and Jack. Jack was also holding Emma, my daughter. When I walked in, they were surprised to say the least, and I started flipping out and grabbed my daughter and packed a bag with her stuff. My father and Jack's mother were pleading with me to not leave while I was packing. When I went to leave, my dad was crying, now begging me to forgive him. I said I would never forgive him and went to walk out. On my way out, Jack grabbed my arm and said I should be nicer to my father. My father called me hundreds of times, but I never answered him. I left to get an apartment with my husband and daughter. I also got a babysitter for when I was in class. A week after this incident, my father put over $100,000 in my bank account to buy me over or get me to talk to him. I didn't even know where he got that money from. My younger sister got married years after this happened, and I had to interact with my dad again. I had to be civil with him as he asked about Emma, who he hadn't seen in 10 years, my son Tyler, and my current pregnancy. He told me how he wanted to fix things with me and see his grandkids before he eventually dies. He even claimed he always believed me about the assault. He just didn't want to be fired. I asked him if he still hangs out with Jack's mother. He said sometimes, but mostly at church. I left the conversation at that. I was mad because on top of allowing Jack to see my daughter, he hangs out with the woman who went around town telling everyone that I was lying, that Jack hadn't taken advantage of me and we actually slept together. And I felt guilty about it and lied saying he assaulted me. When I got home, I was mad and just needed to cool down. I thought a lot that night about what happened, and the next day, I made the decision to call my dad for the first time in 10 years. I wanted to talk to him more and see if we could move forward from what happened and see if I could forgive him. The conversation went well at first. We were talking about current things in our life, but then the conversation turned to church, which led to him talking about Jack. He felt the need to inform me how much my daughter looks like his other kids because apparently I'm supposed to care. I told him I did not want to talk about him, but he continued. He said he's a better person now and feels terrible for what he did, and how I should forgive him because it happened so long ago. You should be over it by now, he said. I got mad. My father has never heard about what happened from me. He only ever listened to Jack's story about what happened. So I told him what happened, what really happened, and how his talking about the man who assaulted me will make me have zero respect for him. I told him to never call me, to keep our relationship the way it's been for the last years because he is never going to change. I ended with telling him I would never bring any of my kids around him because I couldn't trust him to be around them. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, trying to steady my breathing. My husband looked up from his laptop at the dining table, concern etched across his face. He didn't need to ask what happened. He could see it written all over me. I sat down heavily in the chair across from him, the glass trembling in my grip. The conversation with my father kept replaying in my mind, especially his words about how I should be over it by now. My stomach turned as I thought about his casual mention of Jack's other children, as if comparing them to Emma was somehow normal or acceptable. My husband closed his laptop and reached across the table, placing his hand over mine. I pulled away and stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing to do something with the angry energy coursing through me. I started pacing the kitchen, my footsteps echoing on the tile floor. The doorbell rang, interrupting my spiral of thoughts. I froze immediately on edge, edge. We weren't expecting anyone. My husband got up to answer it while I stayed in the kitchen listening. I heard the door open, then the sound of rustling paper. He came back carrying a small package addressed to Emma. "There's no return address," he said, turning the box over in his hands. Something cold settled in my stomach as I took the package from him. It was wrapped in pink paper with a bow on top, clearly meant to appeal to a young girl. My fingers tightened around the box as suspicion crept through me. I grabbed a knife from the drawer and carefully cut through the tape. Inside was a silver necklace with a heart pendant along with a note that simply said, "For Emma, from someone who cares." My hands started shaking again, this time with a different kind of fear. I showed the note to my husband, watching his jaw tighten as he read it. Without a word, I walked to the garbage can and dropped the entire package inside. My husband nodded in agreement. We both knew we couldn't tell Emma about this. Not yet. She was at school, blissfully unaware that someone was trying to send her gifts. Over the next few days, more packages arrived. A bracelet, a book about family trees, a photo album with blank pages. Each one went straight into the trash without Emma knowing. I started checking the mail obsessively, intercepting anything suspicious before she could see it. Then one afternoon, Emma came home from school with an unusual bounce in her step. She dropped her backpack by the door and practically skipped into the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. "Mom, I made a new friend online," she announced, pulling out her phone. My knife paused mid-chop. "Oh, tell me about them," I said, trying to keep my voice casual while alarm bells rang in my head. "His name is Sebastian," Emma said, scrolling through her messages. "He knows so much about our family. He told me things about Grandpa that even you probably don't know." The knife slipped from my hand, clattering onto the cutting board. I turned to face Emma fully, my heart pounding. "What kind of things?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Emma shrugged, still looking at her phone. "Just stuff about when he was younger, where he worked, things like that. He says he's doing genealogy research and found our family really interesting." I walked over and gently took the phone from her hands. "Honey, can I see these messages?" Emma looked confused, but handed it over. As I scrolled through the conversation, my blood ran cold. The messages were careful, friendly, but there were details only someone close to our family would know. Details about my father's old job, about the town we used to live in, about family members I'd never mentioned to Emma. "Emma, I need you to block this person right now," I said, handing the phone back to her. "But Mom, why? He's just being friendly. Please, just do it," I insisted, my voice sharper than I intended. Emma's face fell, but she did as I asked, blocking the account. I pulled her into a hug, trying to calm my racing thoughts. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I just want you to be safe online. You can't trust people you don't know in real life." That evening, after Emma went to bed, I called my father. He answered on the second ring, sounding surprised to hear from me again so soon. "I thought you said never to call you," he said, a hint of hope in his voice. "Did you give someone Emma's information?" I demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" "Someone's been sending gifts to Emma, anonymous packages, and now she's getting messages online from someone who knows way too much about our family. Did you tell someone where we live?" "I don't know what you're talking about," my father stammered, but something in his voice didn't ring true. "Dad, I swear if you had anything to do with this—" "Did Emma like the gifts?" he asked suddenly, then immediately tried to backtrack. "I mean, if someone sent her gifts, did she see them?" My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles went white. "You knew about the gifts?" I said, my voice deadly quiet. "You knew, and you didn't think to warn me. I just thought maybe if she got to know him a little through nice gestures." I hung up before he could finish. My whole body was shaking with rage. I immediately went to our computer and started changing all of our online passwords, privacy settings, everything I could think of. My husband helped, both of us working in intense silence. The next few weeks were a nightmare of vigilance. I drove Emma to and from school every day. No more walking with friends. I attended every school event, scanning the crowds for any sign of Jack. Then I saw him. It was at Emma's spring concert. He was standing at the back of the auditorium, partially hidden behind a pillar, but I recognized him instantly. The same build, the same way of standing with his hands in his pockets. My blood turned to ice as I watched him watching the stage where Emma would soon perform. I whispered to my husband, who immediately got up and walked toward the back. But by the time he reached the pillar, Jack was gone. We stayed for Emma's performance, but I couldn't focus on her beautiful singing. My eyes kept scanning the exits, the shadows, anywhere he might be hiding. This pattern continued for weeks. Jack would appear at the edges of Emma's activities, soccer games, school plays, even outside the grocery store when we were shopping. Always just visible enough for me to see him, never close enough to violate any legal boundaries. He was playing a sick game and I was losing my mind. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I left Emma with my husband one evening and drove to Jack's house. I'd found his address through public records, my hands shaking as I typed his name into the search bar. The house was modest, well kept, with children's toys scattered on the front lawn. The sight of those toys made my stomach turn. I rang the doorbell and waited. When Jack opened the door, his face showed no surprise. He'd been expecting me. "Leave my family alone," I said, without preamble. "Stop sending gifts. Stop showing up at Emma's school. Stop trying to contact her online." Jack leaned against the doorframe, a small smile playing at his lips. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said calmly. "I'm just a concerned father who wants to know his daughter." "She's not your daughter," I spat. "You gave up any right to her the day you admitted what you did to me." His smile faded slightly. "Legal rights can be challenged," he said quietly, "especially when the mother is clearly unstable, cutting off family members, paranoid about innocent gifts." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "I'm just saying," Jack continued, his voice maddeningly calm, "that courts tend to favor reformed individuals who've paid their debt to society, especially when they can prove the other parent is alienating the child from their biological family." I turned and walked away before I did something I'd regret, but his words echoed in my mind all the way home. That night, I started documenting everything, every sighting, every gift, every attempt at contact. I took screenshots of the online messages, photographed the packages before throwing them away, created a detailed timeline of his stalking behavior. My husband suggested we go to the police, but I knew we needed more than just my word against his. So we installed security cameras around our house, dash cams in our cars, and I started carrying a voice recorder in my purse. If Jack wanted to play legal games, I'd be ready. The situation escalated when Emma came home from school one day in tears. Some kids had been saying mean things about me, calling me a liar and saying I'd ruined a good man's life. The rumors were spreading through the school like wildfire, and I knew exactly who was behind them. I called an emergency meeting with Emma's principal and teachers. Sitting in that conference room, I laid out the situation as calmly as I could, explaining the history without going into traumatic details. The principal, Mrs. Catherine, listened with growing concern. "We've actually had a man asking questions about Emma," her teacher said slowly. "He claimed to be a family friend doing a surprise for her birthday. We didn't give him any information, of course, but it was unsettling." I provided them with Jack's photo and a copy of the restraining order I'd started the process for. They promised to increase security and notify me immediately if he appeared again, but I knew I needed to do more. That weekend, I organized a community gathering at our local park. I'd lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, built relationships with our neighbors, been active in the community. These people knew me, trusted me. It was time to control the narrative before Jack's poison spread further. Standing in front of the gathered crowd, neighbors, Emma's friends, parents, local business owners, I took a deep breath and began to speak. I didn't go into graphic details, but I explained that someone from my past who had hurt me was now trying to insert himself into my daughter's life. I asked for their support in keeping our children safe and being vigilant about strangers asking questions. The response was overwhelming. Parents shared their own stories of protecting their children, offered to help with school pickup, promised to keep an eye out. Mrs. Jones from down the street, whose daughter was Emma's best friend, pulled me aside afterward. "We've got your back," she said firmly. "Anyone tries to spread lies about you in this neighborhood, they'll have to go through all of us first." But Jack wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I was served with legal papers. My father and Jack had filed a petition with Child Protective Services, claiming I was neglecting Emma's emotional needs by denying her access to her biological family. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. My husband immediately called our lawyer while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the papers in disbelief. My own father had conspired with my attacker to try to take my daughter away from me. The betrayal cut deeper than anything he'd done before. The next few months were a blur of legal preparations, gathering evidence, and trying to maintain normality for Emma and Tyler. We didn't tell Emma about the legal battle, but she sensed something was wrong. She'd become quieter, more anxious, clinging to me in a way she hadn't since she was little. The court date arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. I dressed carefully, choosing a conservative suit that made me look responsible, stable. My husband held my hand as we walked into the courthouse, our lawyer Seb carrying boxes of evidence. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Jack sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyer, my father beside him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Jack, however, stared at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The judge entered and we all stood. My legs felt unsteady as I watched her take her seat, knowing she held my family's future in her hands. The proceedings began with Jack's lawyer presenting their case, painting me as an unstable mother who'd cut off family ties and denied Emma her heritage. I gripped the edge of the table as they presented their evidence. Photos of me at the community gathering, which they twisted into proof of my paranoid behavior. They had recordings of my father crying about being denied access to his grandchildren. They even had character witnesses from Jack's church, people who testified about his transformation and dedication to his family. When it was our turn, Seb methodically laid out our evidence, the timeline of stalking incidents, the anonymous packages, screenshots of the online messages to Emma, security camera footage showing Jack lurking near our home. Each piece built our case, but I could see the judge's expression remained neutral, giving nothing away. Then came the testimony phase. My father took the stand first, dabbing at his eyes as he described how I'd torn our family apart and prevented him from having a relationship with Emma. He claimed he'd only allowed Jack to see Emma that one time because he believed in forgiveness and second chances. During cross-examination, Seb pressed him about the anonymous gifts. He denied knowledge at first, but when Seb presented phone records showing calls between him and Jack's number immediately before each package arrived, he faltered. The judge's eyebrow raised slightly, the first crack in her poker face. Jack testified next, presenting himself as a reformed man who'd made mistakes in his youth, but had since dedicated his life to being a good father and community member. He spoke about his other children, his stable marriage, his volunteer work. He claimed he only wanted to know Emma existed and was well cared for. When Seb questioned him about appearing at Emma's school events, Jack had an answer for everything. He was just passing by. He had legitimate business in the area. He'd never approached Emma directly, so where was the harm? His calm demeanor made my skin crawl. Then something unexpected happened. The judge called for a brief recess, and when we returned, she announced that Emma had requested to speak with her privately in chambers. My heart stopped. We hadn't prepared Emma for this possibility. She didn't even know the full extent of what was happening. The wait was excruciating. 20 minutes felt like hours. When the judge returned, her expression had changed. She called the court back to order and announced that based on Emma's testimony and the evidence presented, she was not only denying the petition, but issuing a permanent restraining order against Jack. Relief flooded through me, but Jack's face had turned dark. As we left the courthouse, he brushed past me and whispered, "This isn't over." My father hurried after him without looking at me, their alliance now fully exposed. The next few weeks were deceptively quiet. Emma seemed lighter, though we still hadn't told her the full details of the court case. She only knew that some people had been bothering our family and the judge had made them stop. We tried to return to normal life, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. Then the accident started. First, my husband's brake lines were mysteriously damaged, caught by our mechanic during a routine service before anything happened. Then, Emma's school received an anonymous tip about substances in her locker, resulting in a humiliating search that found nothing. Our credit cards were repeatedly compromised. Someone called child services with false reports of neglect. Each incident alone could be explained away, but the pattern was clear. Jack was trying to destabilize our lives without technically violating the restraining order. We reported everything to the police, but without concrete proof linking him to these incidents, their hands were tied. The breaking point came when Emma's best friend's mother, Mrs. Jones, called me in tears. Someone had sent compromising photos to her husband's workplace, photos that had been digitally altered to look like her in inappropriate situations. The anonymous message claimed she was having an affair with multiple men in the neighborhood. Her marriage was in crisis. Other families who'd supported us began experiencing similar attacks. Mysterious calls to employers, false reports to various agencies, digitally manipulated images. Jack was systematically targeting anyone who'd stood by us, trying to isolate us from our support system. Some families distanced themselves, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Others stood firm, but I could see the strain it was putting on them. The guilt ate at me. These people were suffering because they'd tried to help us. Then Emma came home from school one day with news that shattered our carefully maintained calm. "Mom, we have a new counselor at school," she said. "Mr. McCathan. He seems really interested in our family. He keeps asking me how things are at home." My blood ran cold. I immediately called the school, but the secretary confirmed they'd hired a new counselor. His credentials checked out. His references were solid. There was no reason to suspect him of anything inappropriate, but the timing was too convenient. I drove to the school the next morning, determined to meet this new counselor. The man who greeted me in the counseling office was unfamiliar, professional, seemingly genuine, but something in his eyes when he looked at me set off every alarm in my system. Over the following days, Emma mentioned more conversations with Mr. McCathan. He was asking about her feelings regarding family, whether she ever felt like she was missing something in her life, if she ever wondered about extended family members she didn't know. The questions were subtle, carefully worded to seem therapeutic, but I recognized the manipulation. We tried to request Emma be assigned to a different counselor, but the school administration pushed back. Mr. McCathan was highly qualified, they said. Emma seemed to respond well to him. Without concrete evidence of wrongdoing, they wouldn't make a change. Meanwhile, the harassment campaign continued. My husband's employer received anonymous complaints about his work performance. Tyler's daycare was repeatedly called with false concerns about bruises and behavioral issues. Every aspect of our lives was under attack. Then I received a call that changed everything. It was from a woman named Sarah who said she needed to speak with me urgently about Jack. We met at a coffee shop downtown, where she revealed she was Jack's ex-wife, the mother of his other children. Sarah's story was chilling. She'd left Jack years ago after discovering he'd been grooming their teenage babysitter. She'd fought for full custody and won, but Jack had systematically destroyed her life in revenge. Lost jobs, ruined relationships, constant legal battles. She'd eventually moved across the country to escape him. When I heard he was doing this to another family, I had to warn you, she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. This is everything I documented. Every incident, every pattern. He won't stop until he gets what he wants or destroys you trying. The folder was a roadmap of Jack's tactics. Sarah had detailed how he recruited others to help him, how he stayed just within legal boundaries while orchestrating chaos. Most importantly, she had names and dates that correlated with similar incidents in our lives. Armed with this new information, we went back to the police. This time, they took notice. The pattern of behavior across multiple victims in different states suggested something more serious than harassment. They opened a formal investigation, but Jack must have sensed the walls closing in. The attacks intensified. Our home security system was mysteriously offline one night, though nothing was taken. Emma received a birthday card at school with no signature, just a photo of a family reunion she'd never attended. Tyler's daycare reported a man matching Jack's description asking questions about pickup procedures. Then came the night that nearly broke us. I woke at 3 a.m. to find Emma's bedroom window open, her curtains billowing in the breeze. She was still asleep in her bed, unharmed, but someone had been in our home. On her desk was a photo, Jack holding a baby with "She looks just like you did" written on the back. The police found no fingerprints, no DNA, no evidence except the photo. The security cameras showed nothing. They'd been disabled remotely. Jack had wanted us to know he could reach Emma whenever he wanted. The message was clear. The restraining order meant nothing to him. We moved Emma into our bedroom that night. I didn't sleep for days, jumping at every sound. My husband took time off work to help with security. We were prisoners in our own home, afraid to let our children out of our sight. The school situation escalated when Mr. McCathan suggested Emma join a special family dynamics group therapy session. When I refused, he expressed concern about my resistance to Emma's emotional development. Suddenly, I was painted as the problematic parent preventing my child from getting help. Other parents began receiving calls from Mr. McCathan, expressing worry about Emma's home situation. He suggested she showed signs of emotional neglect, that she seemed isolated from extended family. The seeds of doubt he planted grew quickly in the school community gossip mill. Emma started coming home upset, saying kids were asking why her mom didn't want her to be happy, why she wasn't allowed to know her real family. The psychological warfare was taking its toll on all of us, but especially on her. Then Sarah called with urgent news. She'd been tracking Jack's activities through a network of his other victims she'd connected with over the years. He'd recently been in contact with a lawyer known for taking on parental alienation cases, someone who specialized in overturning restraining orders and gaining custody for reformed parents. We realized this had all been part of a larger plan. The harassment wasn't just revenge. It was designed to make me look unstable, paranoid, unfit. Every reaction I had was being documented and twisted to support a future custody case. I made the difficult decision to pull Emma out of school for the remainder of the year, citing safety concerns. The school threatened truancy charges, but our lawyer advised it was better than leaving her exposed to Mr. McCathan's influence. The isolation was crushing. Emma missed her friends, her normal life. She began asking questions we couldn't fully answer without traumatizing her. How do you explain to a child that